Welcome to the Bravely Connected podcast. I'm your host, Connie Jakab, and today I'm excited because we are going to be talking about how to create a powerful culture in your school. But this also applies to any place, any space, your home, your community, it doesn't matter. But this is an issue that I've been noticing when I go around and I do those teachers' conventions. This is the one thing that I heard is people not taking responsibility for what they can. And so I have brought in a very special guest all the way from Australia, from Brisbane. I want you to hit that subscribe button because on this podcast, we talk about how to be bravely connected to yourself and also bravely connected to others. Bernii Godwin from Brisbane, Australia. How are you?
Hi, Connie. I'm good. How are you?
I am so good. You and I have been trying to get on a podcast together for a couple of months now.
Yes, we have been like ships in the night. It's been hard to collaborate on time zones.
Time zones are fun, but I'm glad
Yeah.
this is honestly the perfect time. We just came off teachers convention season where I am, and I had numerous teachers come into the sessions on disarming angry parents and also just hearing from teachers about powerlessness going on in their schools. And I wanted to introduce them to the one that I have learned this concept from. That is you. That is from Danny Silk. In your
Mhm.
book, Loving Your Students on Purpose, you talk a lot about this. And so let's dive in. Let's maybe start with what is powerlessness and what is powerfulness? Let's maybe define those.
Yes, I mean, I love using these words because they're so uncomfortable. When we use the word powerful, it's a disruptor. It really gets people thinking, it gets their back up. But if we can get to the point of discussing it, like you said, and defining those, we can redefine the term to be something really healthy. Now, most people think of someone powerful as someone who's bossy or dominant or rich or has an influence over a large scope of people, and that they use that influence in negative ways to control and manipulate. So often we think of, those sorts of people, but what we're suggesting in Loving Our Students of Purpose is being powerful is nothing to do with control and coercion and manipulation and fear and intimidation. Being powerful is a state of being able to manage ourselves well, no matter what's going on around us. So, in contrast from powerlessness is those bossy, dominant people. You know, those people who like hijack a meeting just with their presence or with their tone when they walk into a room. Those people who, you don't really want to hang around for too long, or you're afraid of how they're going to react. So they use that fear to kind of get what they want. That's powerlessness. That's someone who's actually given their power away because they are actually afraid. And so spending some time thinking about what is powerful, what is powerless is really, I think, very important. And so we talk about what is powerful, and we think about three key characteristics that we look for in people who are demonstrating and living out powerful lives. But it would be the same in an organization, it would be the same in a nation or in a community. If you were to see a powerful nation, a powerful community, it's the same traits you're looking for. And it's these three. So number one is I can be respectful and respect others. So I require respect. So that starts with me. I will be respectful towards me and I will be respectful myself. It is not about whether you're respectful to me. That's not the condition. The condition of a powerful person is I get to choose my level of respect and I get to choose how many respectful or disrespectful interactions I engage in. That's a choice I get to make. So it's freedom of choice. So a
Mm.
powerful person will require respectful relationships. They also are able to set limits and boundaries. Now, you can only set a limit or boundary, and I think this is so connected to the Bravely Connected podcast because it's if you can value yourself, if you know your boundaries, and if you value yourself, you're actually in a position where you can say, "This is my boundary." Unfortunately, so many people interpret boundaries as something we place on other people. And I think of that. The image that instantly comes to mind is Homer Simpson strangling Bart Simpson. It's like, this is my boundary. I will make you do this. And that's not a boundary. Like, that's a demand. And so a boundary is me knowing my value, me knowing my what I value and what I want to prioritize, and then putting a boundary around me to protect it. I get to protect it. Powerless people, they let their boundaries are all over the place and people walk all over what's important to them and then they get angry about it and they blame the other person for squishing their boundaries.
Yeah.
So the first one's require respect for relationship. The second one is setting limits and boundaries. And the third one is I can manage myself no matter what you're doing.
Mm.
Like straight away, the image in my mind, I think of our preps, which is our 4, 5 year olds, first year of school, and you walk into a room, and those teachers are managing themselves no matter what's happening that day. Because those kids are unpredictable. I mean, so are our middle schoolers and our senior students. Our kids are unpredictable. So is our teams that we work with. But can we manage ourselves? Can we regulate our emotions? Can we choose how we react? On a good day and a bad day. And let's face it, powerful people can manage themselves really well on a good day, but we don't all have good days. This is not a perfect method for perfection. This is about knowing what we want to recalibrate to when we go a little bit off course. And so, even as a community, you want communities that are built on, can we respect who we are as a community? Can we respect ourselves and respect others? Do we require it in our community? Do we value our community so much so that we actually can set boundaries and limits and say, this is what our line is, and this is who we are. We have identity. And can we manage ourselves in community no matter what others are doing, no matter what people in that country across the ocean are doing, or no matter what that politician is doing, we have identity that we hold to because of who we are. And I think like if we can come back to those three principles, even as a culture, we can start to create powerful cultures. Anyway,
Mm.
that's my overview of definitions. I know it's a bit long, but I think those are three significant keys that if we could just hold on to, we calibrate back to. We don't
Mm.
into perfection.
That is so good. I think that sometimes we forget that we are in control of the respect level that we will bring, no matter what somebody else is doing around us. And I really love the difference that you said between boundaries and demands.
Mhm.
Demanding someone does something. That isn't a boundary. That really clicked for me. A boundary is
Mhm.
I will be doing this while you are doing that.
Mhm.
That is beautiful. And so let's talk about this because I was just having a conversation with a principal this week. She was shifted to a different school and she's coming to this new school and they're all looking at her like, you will save the day. You will be the one who makes
You're
this
gonna
culture
rescue
great.
us.
Our last principal sucked, and now you're coming in and you're going to do this. Let's talk about that.
Interesting. Well, I mean, straight away, I'm throwing back to the irresponsibility cycle, which is so quickly triggered in situations like this. Like, it's so easy for the outgoing person to be blamed for everything that went wrong, even if they did a fantastic job, but they produced a certain structure and regulated an environment just by their presence. So when they go, that changes. And so there's holes that are more obvious that they would have naturally filled. And so it's easy to blame, and powerless people are natural blamers. It's like what they do as a profession. They look for who or what out there they can blame problems on all the time. And so when I hear stories like that, it's like, oh, everyone's looking to me to have the answer. One, that's too much pressure on a human. One person, because it's a team effort, right? One principal cannot actually change the environment. One principal can build a significant amount of influence through connection and create a team around them where they can shift the culture together. But culture is driven by a team. One person can't drive a culture. It's about the other people who are feeling influenced to head in the same direction. And
Mm.
so I mentioned irresponsibility cycle earlier. This is that picture of the rescuer, the bad guy, and the victim, that triangle that plays out. Many people know it as Cartman's triangle. Watch any TV sitcom, and in those 28 minutes, that's what's playing out. There's a victim, the poor victim, pointing to the bad guy, and then there's a rescuer who wants to rescue them from the bad guy, but then the bad guy's like, "What? Why am I the bad guy? Help, help, I'm the victim." And so the rescuer turns into the bad guy. And once the rescuer feels like the bad guy, now they feel like the victim because everyone's pointing at them. And this is why we see such high turnover in leadership, because we just see them trapped in the cycle of irresponsibility rather than building cultures that know how to sustain themselves and know what they're standing for as their identity. Again, those three key areas we talked about earlier need to be integrated into our culture so that we can continue to move in a direction as a team. Um,
And
I
you
know one
have
of the,
an example of a
yeah,
swimming pool. Like you have an
yes,
example of a swimming pool. What is that? Because I love that analogy.
Yes, that was a previous conversation. You and I were chatting about the above ground swimming pool. And honestly, I stole it from Danny Silk's work. He uses this metaphor, and then I've applied it into the school context. But the idea is, I don't know if you guys had this in Canada where it's so cold, but here in Australia, we had these above ground swimming pools. They'd sit like a meter and a half off the ground, and they kind of made out of tarp, kind of really thick tarp material, and they've got like these plastic edges, and you jump into these above ground swimming pools with all your friends, climb up this rickety ladder, and there wasn't much to do because the water really only comes like up to your waist, like they're not deep, and you all start pushing in the same direction. You all kind of just look at each other and be like, I know what we could do. We can make a whirlpool. And so everyone spreads out around the pool and you all start pushing in the same direction. It's hard. It's really hard to push at first. But with enough time and momentum and cheering each other on, you start to get this beautiful flow going around the swimming pool. And at some point, someone's like, hey guys, put your feet up. And it's just pulling you along in that direction. This is how culture works. If we are all heading in the same direction, we don't all have to be in the same place. We definitely don't all have to be on the same page, but we do want to know the direction we're heading in. Then we can push in the same direction together as a team. The principal is usually right in the middle of the pool where they have the least amount of momentum. Now, this week, we've just had a cyclone come through Brisbane. You may have seen it on the news. And the location of my house, as the cyclone came over, we had 12 hours of the destructive wind, and then we hit the eye of the storm. And in the eye, and right in the middle of that big whirlpool, it was calm. There wasn't a lot happening. It was peaceful. We didn't get a lot of damage. And then, of course, cyclone moves on. We had another couple hours of wind. But that eye of the cyclone is a little bit like the eye of the pool when you have that whirlpool. There's not a lot happening there. That's where the principle is. Their job is to encourage you and to point the direction. You're going this way. Come on, guys. Their job is to be paying attention and going, ah, oh, Johnny over there and Ruby over there, pop your feet back down. Don't just float on the top because it's going to slow down, and remind them. They're really paying attention, but our job is to actually be spread out in the pool, making the whirlpool. And of
Mm.
course, what would happen if your pesky neighbor kid jumped the fence, went, "Whoa, that looks like fun," and bomb dived into your pool? Like your culture would be destroyed. That pesky neighbor kid represents COVID. It represents a sudden change in curriculum or a sudden change in government funding. Or it represents that new family that just started at your school that's very different to what you're used to.
Mm.
And so our job is to get around that person as a team, not just as one leader, and show them this is the direction we're going in. This is how you put your feet down. This is how we push. What
Mm.
I tend to notice is what schools do is they might do this once, they get this beautiful momentum, they have a history story. They're always like back in the old days when we were getting it right. But when it slowed down because no one put their feet back down, they celebrated, they floated, they're like, this is fun. Nobody went to work putting the momentum back into the culture. Just
Mm.
like as kids, anytime we did a whirlpool, once we finished floating, nobody could be bothered doing it again. You only ever did it once. And the same with culture. If we're just going to do it once and then look at the glory days, we're never going to actually get that consistent, regular pace of culture. So we want to show others who are joining our culture, how do you put your feet down? How do you push in the same direction? And we need to make space for the people who need to get out of our pool because they're tired and wrinkly and pruny. And maybe it's time for them to get out of our pool and new people to get in. How do we make that possible for
Yeah.
them as well? So yeah,
Oh, that's
that's
so
that
good.
picture.
I love that analogy. I mean, that just makes so much sense. And so let's shift from the team culture to
Mhm.
returning to one another. What would you say to a parent and a teacher who are having some real problems in the context of a powerful culture?
I mean, I think you've nailed the issue. The real issue here is disconnection. We're disconnected from identity, from purpose, from who we are. And we think that to be those things, we all have to be the same. Um, and I mean, with the kids, when I'm working with students, and I use this at home with my son, it's a really simple picture of, the peace symbol. And I say to him, what does peace mean? And he can now say to me, he's like, I have my opinion and you have your opinion. And that's okay, we're different, but we live in peace. And I mean, personally, I find that very disarming. Now, would I do that with a parent? Maybe if I was using it as a way to like educate. Like this is an idea of way you could work with your teenager or what like something the way you could communicate or think for yourself. How do we have peace? But that is peace, is that we are all different. We're created differently. We've got different beliefs. That doesn't mean we are not sharing a community or not sharing an identity. How do we work together when we're different? And yes, I could not even begin to imagine or speak into what it must be like for you guys in Canada right now. But also, that division was there before this happened.
Yeah.
This has just brought it to the surface and exposed it, just like a few years ago, 6 years ago, COVID brought all our divisions and opinions to the surface. And, we all polarized then. Should we get the vax? Shouldn't we? Who cares? Personally, what you do is what you do, and what I do is what I do, and I can love you anyway because my goal is connection, my goal is relationship, and it doesn't require you to be me. It requires you to be you and me to be me. And if I'm just paying attention to me being me, then I'm not so energized towards changing you so that you don't look scary because you're different. And I think so many of our world's problems are simply rooted in disconnection. You're different to me, so I'm going to push you away. I'm going to disconnect and not seek relationship or even intentionally be scary so you won't come near me. And I guess the question is, what can we do to be safe so people want to still be in our presence, still connect, even if they believe something different?
Yes, and I love this. The call is a return to relationship, making relationship the goal rather than being right or rather than pinning on who to blame or being the victim. I love this.
Mm-hmm.
You have a term, and I use this too. How am I going to hold the end of my rope?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that because when we're thinking about turning towards keeping relationship as the goal, say parent teacher or parent student, doesn't matter. What does this look like?
Yeah. Again, I love a good metaphor. If you read any of my work, there's a metaphor for everything. This one is one that Danny used to present this idea of how do we have powerful connections. Essentially, I get to hold my end of the rope. I don't get to choose what you do with your end of the rope, but there is an end. And so a student or a teacher could choose to be in connection and hold their end of the rope, but they could choose not to. But the point is, it's a rope connection because it's made up of lots of little fibers, lots of intentionality to build up that strength of relationship. So when there's a difference of opinion or when I need to ask something of you, there's a tug, it doesn't snap. And you're more likely to go, okay, I'll keep that connection in spite of the pressure on that relationship. Unfortunately, so many of us have these relationships that instead of being like a rope, they're like a tissue. And so we're holding this thin little thread, and then we pull on that relationship and it just rips apart. And now there's no connection, and we're both doing our own thing and feeling hurt and wounded and waiting for the other person to take responsibility because it couldn't possibly be our fault. And
No.
so the picture is, how do we build connection that is nice and strong and got lots of little fibers? And what do we do if we do take a withdrawal to rebuild it? Because it's an intentional act. It's not just a one and done. I've got a connection. Woo, this is great. It's actually something we consciously do all the time with the people in our sphere of influence. And so if I'm holding my end of the rope, then let's say a student has said, I don't want to be in a relationship, and they let go of the end of the rope. Now, what happens if I go, well, you don't want relationship, I don't either, and I let go? Now the rope's on the floor. And if that student comes along and is like, actually, I'm in a situation, I need help, I need to talk to an adult, I'm going to go to my teacher, and they pick up their end of the rope, and I'm not there holding my end, what happens? And in desperation, when I'm doing this as a demonstration, I take that end of the rope and I start whipping it around the room as that student tries to connect back, like, please pick up my end of the rope. And of course, what are you going to do as a teacher when a student is acting like that? Self-protect. We're going to move away. We're going to eventually, what we might expel them or remove them from the school because they're so scary. But what they're actually going for is connection. It can happen the same way. Like the student might be the one letting go and we're holding on, and teachers can be the scary one. Why won't they connect with me? It's like we need to stay safe. How do we stay self-regulated? How do we stay safe? How do we continually sow into relationship, regardless of whether they pick up the end or not? Because we actually don't get to choose that. We don't get to choose if somebody else wants to be in relationship. And this can be really confronting because sometimes we think like if we send our child to counseling or if we go to marriage counseling, they can make them pick up the end of the rope. It's like, no. Like for love to exist, there needs to be freedom. And for freedom to exist, there need to be choices. One of those choices is love. One of those choices is holding the end of the rope. I get to manage my choice in that situation. I don't get to manage yours. And that can be really confronting for people to be able to even respond to it. Like, why do they want relationship with me? It's hard. It's hard when people don't choose you back, but you hold on to your end anyway.
And it could really, I think just that small visual when a parent is working with a teacher, or teacher or parent, or, around the circle we go, just how am I going to hold the end of my rope? I will hold my end of the rope no matter what they
Mhm.
do. And I'm going to do that
Mhm.
through those 3 steps that you gave us at the very beginning on how to be
Mhm.
powerful. I'm going to choose my respect level, not theirs. I
Mhm.
love the I will have boundaries, not demands. And what was the third one?
I will manage myself no matter what you're doing.
I
Yeah.
will manage myself no matter what you're doing.
Yeah. I'll
Yeah.
also add there's this notion that goes around a lot. And look, I say it too, I get it, which says connect before you correct. And
Hmm.
it's a lovely notion if you have a rope connection already. But if you are waiting until that rope is now threadbare and it's a tissue, and now there's a disconnect, and you're like, oh, I better just sew in now enough to get one thread so I can pull on it. And then we wonder why trust is being broken over and over again. That connection is not authentic. It's not being built regardless of whether you're having a good day or a bad day. It's I'm just doing enough so that I can hold you accountable. I'm just doing enough so I can take it away. That's manipulation. And so, in the bigger picture, and so I suggest it's important when we think about do I have a rope connection, is are there lots of fibers in the rope? And if it's threadbare or if it's tissue thin, how can I build it up way in advance, intentionally? Because the child might be in grade 2 now, and I might not need to pull on that rope connection with his teachers until I'm in grade 6. And there's something big happening and there's a leadership decision and I just need to step in and ask some information. I don't want to be like, well, now I'm going to try and quickly, buy you a box of chocolates and then I'm going to ask for something. Or I just want to have a nice, strong, solid relationship that's been intentionally built and protected and nurtured over time.
That is, yes, that's it right there.
Mhm.
Bernie, this has been an incredible time. I think that when I think about this little dream that I have, and I know you share this dream too, of what would it look like if we were in connection with one another? How would that
Mhm.
change our homes? How would that change our schools and our communities? This is how we do this. This is how we do it. This is the strategy. And I
Yeah.
just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing this. And your book, Loving Your Students on Purpose. I mean, to be honest, anyone could read this and they could read it from a context of leadership. They could read it
Mhm.
from a context of a parent. They can read it
Yeah.
in any context. What's the best way for them to check out your book?
You can jump on any of the online bookstores or audio bookstores and get a copy that's available. I think that's the best way in Canada and Australia. We do have copies in Coorong, or you can jump on my website if you're in Australia as well and buy them directly. But the best place would be Amazon or one of those online bookstores.
Hmm.
And if you're doing it with your school, so many people have reached out to me. We actually have made a free complimentary book discussion guide on our website. So if you are looking at the book and want to do it with your leadership team, which is really common here in Australia, jump onto www.godwin, Godwin, consulting.com.au. You have to remember to put the AU for Australia. Sometimes that gets a bit confusing. But sure, Connie can put that in the show notes. But if you jump on there, there's a complimentary book discussion guide. There's a bunch of even some free complimentary posters. There's also an interview that we did with one of our Loving Our Students on Purpose partner school principals that you can listen along to as well.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you for those resources, and I will for sure put them in the show notes. But Bernie, thank you so much for coming today. And it's my afternoon, it's your morning, and wherever everyone else is listening from, just stay bravely connected.